Today I'm going to show you how I went from anxiously attached to secure. I really want to share my journey with you, get into some personal details about how my anxious attachment formed and what are the exact steps that I went through to heal that attachment, right? There's actually 3 exact steps that I'm going to go through today in the lesson, and stick around to the end because I'll share with you what didn't work, what actually got in the way of my healing journey, what got me really confused and set me back. Now, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Amy Kerr and I help women who feel stuck in patterns of self-abandonment that keep attracting them toxic relationships to heal their trauma and learn the discipline of self-love so they can be free to be their true authentic self. And if you want more content on this topic, please click the subscribe button and hit the bell notification so you get notified when I post new lessons every week. Now, before I begin, Heal Your Heart School is open for enrollment, so if you'd like more info on how to apply for that, make sure you stick around to the end. So as a young girl, I was highly sensitive. I was an empath, and I grew up in a relatively isolated environment. I couldn't just get on my bike and go visit my friends. I lived a long, long way away from my social circle, and as a result, I spent a lot of time on my own in my childhood, in my fantasies, in my imagination, which seems like quite an innocent thing for a child to do, but you'll find out later how that really impeded my healing journey and why my insecure attachment formed. But I want to let you know that I had quite a, from the outside, normal childhood. I have very kind, loving parents, but there were just some interesting dynamics that led my insecure attachment to form. I didn't have a strong, secure emotional mirror for me to process my strong emotions. There was a kind of a tendency to shut me away in my room if I was acting out and if I had a strong emotion. And I think this is a relatively normal parenting technique, but the result is that I didn't feel safe in my body. I didn't learn how to process strong emotions. And in that kind of shutting away process, I learned to feel very guilty and shameful about myself. So I really internalized it. And I am the kind of person to really think that it's always my fault when something happens. And I think it formed really early on in my childhood. And this kind of shame monster developed within me from super early on. Now, I also had and have to some degree anxiety, and that really got triggered throughout my schooling journey in my young years and then into my teenagehood. And like I said, I was a really highly sensitive little toddler and I was really needy. So even before I was able to speak, I was very, very clingy to my parents and my mother, and I'm very sensitive to everything and everyone around me. It was like I was absorbing and picking up on all that information. And I had an episode of childhood insomnia around about the time of puberty that really exacerbated my anxious symptoms. And by the time hormones hit and puberty happened for me, I had this incredible like anxious internal world. I just did not know how to handle what the changes were that I was going through. Now, my body developed early on and I naturally got a lot of attention from boys around me. And this combined with my previously mentioned fantasy world that I'd grown up in to become this new internal world where I didn't actually realize it at the time, but I was becoming hyper focused on boys, on dating boys, on kind of chasing them, being in relationship with them, or breaking up with them. And this became kind of an obsession for me and a bit of a world that I lived in to self-soothe this internal turmoil that was occurring, and I wasn't learning the skills to self-soothe and process my emotions properly. So those little schoolyard romances that are really normal and natural to occur when we're young and when we're in high school, they had a greater impact on me and a greater importance in my life. So I was really out of balance. I was so much more focused on those than I was my schoolwork and my friendships. Now, that also combined with some early friendships I had with my best girlfriends where I felt really abandoned. They left me. I kind of felt like one day we were best friends and the next day they just kind of moved on to someone else. And these were 2 really significant things that happened to me that I'm only just now starting to fully understand, that they were also as much a part of my early relationship blueprint as my relationships with my caregivers. So I became really focused on where I was getting attention from, right? This became my emotional home where I was kind of anxiously starting to chase boys in order to get that hit of dopamine, to get those chemicals and to feel a rush of importance and, all those kinds of feel-good things. Now, of course, with that comes the kind of, rejection and all of those natural tendencies that happen when you're in those volatile early relationships. And so my sense of self-worth that I'd been kind of hooking on these relationships with boys would get completely decimated each time I'd either get rejected or something would happen, like one of them would kiss someone else. And I was just kind of on this internal roller coaster of high highs and low lows. Now, a lot of people would look at that and say, well, that's fairly normal for a teenager to go through that when you're kind of navigating the hormonal environment. And I didn't realize that there was anything particularly out of kilter at the time, until I then moved into adulthood and the pattern continued to my detriment. I had a series of unhealthy codependent relationships with men that just got more and more intense, with more and more emotionally unavailable men that would reject me, men that would kind of breadcrumb me. And I had this pattern of being in a relationship for about 2 years and then it would crash and burn. There was this kind of pattern going on. And I didn't realize that I was attracting and drawing in people that were really triggering this internal tumultuous state that had become my emotional home since puberty. Now, this all came to a head, and trigger warning for you, a partner of 3 years that I was in an on-off situationship with took his own life, and it absolutely devastated me. But interestingly, in the grief of that happening, I had a deeper grief because it kind of shook me and woke me up to my own self-abandonment, that I had been chasing love outside of me my whole life. And it was like I'd been in a haze my whole life. I didn't even remember like points in my life. I had a lot of memory loss around it. I'd just been in this kind of limbic state of chasing attention, chasing affection, chasing love, and leapfrogging from relationship to relationship, and not ever really realizing or considering what was going on or taking any kind of responsibility for it. And at this particular moment, it was this relationship that really cracked me open, and I hit rock bottom in terms of my own internal world, and it just woke me up to this level of self-abandonment that was just, it was shocking to me, honestly. And I had no stability in my life. I hadn't been building a life for myself. My career was kind of all over the place, and I didn't have a home. I didn't have financial stability, and my self-esteem and my self-worth was completely zero. I literally felt like I didn't have an identity, and I was just a shell of a person. But in that darkest moment of my life, I had an awakening. I chose life. It was really shocking to me that someone would do that, and I decided to make this life count. And I really believe that the decisions we make in our life are those that define us, and we do have choice over those decisions. But I didn't have a clear path. I then spent years and years looking for answers to try and heal, to try and understand what was going on. I did retreats. I went and did solo travel. I went and did therapy. And to be honest, a lot of things just got me really confused and got me in my head, which I will tell you about later on. And sometimes, and I'm sure you know this, if you're watching YouTube, you can get information overload, and it can be incredibly frustrating because you just want clear answers about how to move forward. So I'm going to condense that now. What actually helped me into 3 steps or 3 principles that healed my insecure attachment and allows me now to show up as secure. But before I do, if you want more info on my story, and if you want to actually go through the steps led by me, I want you to watch my webinar, The Proven 3 Steps to Self-Love After a Toxic Relationship Ends. It goes for about an hour. It's a free training, and you will actually get specific tools in that webinar. But for now, I'm just going to go through the 3 principles that really worked for me. The first principle is probably the most important principle, which is learning how to clear your past and clear the effects your past has on your body, has on your emotional state, on your psyche. Clearing is the most significant tool that you'll ever learn. And it's not specifically a tool, it's a set of tools depending on what works for you. But understanding consciously in my own beliefs and my own patterns that was going on, becoming aware of it, and then identifying where that belief originates in my body was the first step to actually clearing. So I work with that energy in my body as a part, like our inner child or our inner critic, right? We've got all these inner children or inner parts. Like inner firefighter and that inner shame monster. That's been a really important part for me to work with, the one that formed when I was super, super young and kept being sent to my room and not learning how to process emotions safely in my body. Once I had healed my relationship to them, and healing obviously doesn't have an end game. It's not like you flick a switch and you're healed forever. It's more like you have the kind of relationship with that part within you that is more positive than negative, and you feel like you can consciously kind of understand it, work with it, right? You have a working relationship there, and it doesn't take you over. Like you have a semblance of a mature kind of relationship with it. You might get triggered and a trigger will come up, but then your mature part of you can come over and work with that triggered part of you. That's what I consider to be healed. Now, when I did this clearing work, I used specific tools that worked for me, and I really highly recommend you go out and find your own, and I guide you through some of those tools in the webinar. But for me, I realized that I didn't need to revisit any specific memories from my childhood, and this is a question I get asked a lot. Do I have to go back there? And the answer I have for you is that you do not need to go back there, because our memories are stored in our body like frozen trauma, right? Like energy in the body, and how they appear now in your body is how they're affecting your life now. When you start working with them, you might notice you revisit some of your old memories and you get kind of transported back to the past, but we're working with the present manifestation of this energy in your body. So all you need to do is meet your part where you are at now, and work with that part to clear it and to really allow yourself to have a more healing relationship to those parts of you that formed maladaptively in your childhood. Now, the second principle or step that was really important to my healing journey to become secure is equally as important and goes hand in hand with the first step, and that is connecting to my present. Now, this is why I mentioned my fantasy state. When I was in my early childhood, I had a tendency for fantasy, and that's what drove my patterns and how they started in my puberty. So what I needed to do to counteract that was I needed to learn how to be present in my body and with all of the sensations and emotions that are coming up, because anxiety, which was a part of my trauma response, is future fear or past trauma, right? Anxiety takes us into the future, brings the past back up to us. We want to learn safety in the present moment. And not only safety in the present moment, but actually like acknowledging what is present for us in our body, in our emotional state, what our needs are. Part of the reason why I'd had such a memory issue with a lot of my life is because, of course, I was disassociating from things going on because they were too overwhelming for me. And so I had to widen my window of tolerance to allow myself to connect to those parts of me and really like show up for them and stand up for them even in the present, in terms of boundary setting and in terms of like acknowledging and speaking my truth, right? Another piece of connecting to the present was learning what baseline my nervous system was at, because I didn't realize I'd effectively just been in fight or flight almost my entire life, and it's just that chronic underlying anxiety that's going on all the time. You never get a break. It shows up in, ailments in your body. You're always exhausted. You're comfort eating to compensate or whatever it might be for you. And I'd never actually learnt safety in the body. So once I learnt how to reset the baseline of my nervous system and start to work with the parasympathetic response and learn how that feels in my body, which is different from the sympathetic response when you're in fight flight, I was able to then connect to the signals that my body was giving me about the actual, whatever the situation was or how I felt about something. Connecting to all those signals I'd effectively disassociated from my entire life, right? I was living from the neck up, and all of a sudden when I started to feel safe in my body, I realized my body has an incredible intelligence about it, and everything I need to know about what is right in the present moment and what is right for me in a relationship or in a friendship or in work or whatever comes from my body filtering through and then into my higher order thinking. If I don't have that connection going on, there's something in me that doesn't feel safe and I need to get back into alignment internally. And that does happen from time to time, right? This is a habit that formed when I was young. And sometimes I do go back into that limbic state and I'm able to bring myself back into the present state doing that. Now, I learned to do that from my own self-soothing techniques. I learned to do that from working with my own energetic signals. You'll find your own tools. And again, if you want to learn some specific tools that work for me, I do speak about a few of them in the webinar. And what was interesting to me about this principle was it actually showed me how much I was gaslighting myself throughout my life in my relationships. I was literally trying to force connections with people that weren't showing up for me, or force a relationship with a friend that wasn't doing the right thing for me. And I was trying to force connections with my caregivers and the people around me that were letting me down. And I wasn't setting boundaries and I wasn't actually speaking my truth. I was shutting myself down, ignoring the truth and effectively gaslighting who I was. So this second step was a real game changer for me in combination with the clearing tools I'd done before, because the more you clear, the more you can connect. Now, the third step that I went through was an incredibly liberating and exciting step. And of course, you can't do the third step without the first step and second step to be on their way and kind of working in your body. The third step is that I learned how to consciously create my future based on the body signals and everything I knew that was correct and right for me in my present, and any of my past triggers and traumas that were coming up. I would learn then to clear them so that my future was created consciously based on all these previous skills that I'd learned, and I was putting them into practice, so to speak. Now, this is what I really consider to be conscious living. When you are whole, when you're bringing all parts of yourself to the table and you're able to really kind of acknowledge, all of the shame parts and the critic parts, and you're able to kind of have your whole family with you and say, cool, guys, let's work together. I understand why you're here, where you've come from. This is what we want in our life. How can we work together so that this is going to work for us? Might sound really strange to speak like that in a plural, but that is actually what the work feels like. Because before I'd just been axing off parts of myself, right? I'd been totally self-abandoning, and that actually means that those parts are just going to get louder and they're going to scream at you later on, and it's going to be a real shit show, to be honest. So bringing all those parts with me into creating my future was a really conscious decision I made. Now, this was one of the things that really tripped me up, really tripped me up. And if you've ever heard of the term spiritual bypass or have experienced it, you'll know what I'm talking about. Some of the things that I went to do felt really good. This is on my healing journey before I discovered these 3 steps, because I was able to completely pop out of my internal reality and just kind of bypass it and feel fantastic, because I felt connected to spirit. I felt connected to the world. I could just connect with another human being and kind of ignore all the shit and all the stuff that I was feeling and all the shit that they were bringing to the table. And it actually worked to bond me in a trauma bond with someone, that person that then took his life. That happened through spiritual bypass. So it was incredibly damaging, that process of axing off parts of myself and just living in this, I don't know, it was like a hyper excited state, right? Where you're just kind of free of your stuff. What actually worked for me in terms of creating my future was acknowledging my flaws, standing by the parts of me that made decisions that weren't right for me, and really understanding them and giving them love and feeling worthy of love despite them, right? Really allowing myself to experience wholeness. And a part of that was learning how to set boundaries. Boundaries are an incredibly important part of the third step, creating a future, because once you learn how valuable you are and you do all this work, you need to protect it. There are people and situations out there that are going to try and get back in there, take parts of you, show you how to pop out and bypass it, and tell you things are wrong when you feel they're right. All sorts of nonsense can go on. So obviously boundary setting is really important, but in terms of this internal journey, I found it absolutely essential. And we all know the people that get upset when we set boundaries are the people that benefit from us not having any boundaries. And unfortunately, part of this journey and what got us here is not setting boundaries. So what I found is that a lot of people around me really felt a lot of friction when I started to set boundaries, but I was actually standing up for myself and my truth, and I was protecting my heart and protecting all of my parts that were really, really important to me. And I could see when those people reacted in that way, they weren't respecting me and they actually weren't showing up for my highest good, and I could see that they weren't the right kinds of people to have in my life. So I had to be a scientist about my world and about my feelings around it, and I had to really listen to myself, learn this skill of internal language, learn how to stay safe, do all those things that I mentioned, so that I could work, particularly even with my nervous system, to create a life that allows me to be myself, allows me to absolutely flourish, be in flow, talk on YouTube to you guys, and actually experience both things that challenge me and excite me, and in that know that I can show up for myself and I can navigate those experiences, particularly like dating and relationships, because I know myself that well and I can stay regulated in it. Now, I've alluded to the things that kind of got in my way, but this is the main point I wanted to make. If you're on this healing journey, I want to make sure that you don't get stuck in this trap, because I wasted a lot of my time stuck in my head. I wasted a lot of my time reading and writing and talking in therapy and watching YouTubes, and this is all top-down work, right? This is all our cognitive work to heal it. And of course, it's valuable to a degree, but where we're actually wounded is in the body. And often it's a subconscious experience, a subconscious emotion that has frozen in the body at the time when we experienced the trauma. So all of those times I was sent to my room as a very young girl, I have a part of me that is still 3, that is still very scared and feels very alone. And I can feel her as I'm talking to you about it. And she's the one that I have a relationship with now. But if I hadn't done what I call bottom-up work and learned how that energy sits in my body and actually worked somatically with it, I would be left stuck in my head thinking I've healed myself, and then all of a sudden going into another relationship and having a really awful, toxic, dynamic because that person isn't right for me or whatever, and just wondering, like, I thought I'd healed it. It's because I didn't work from the bottom up. I didn't work at that level of the body. So I urge you, whatever healing journey you take, whether you're working in therapy and working with a coach, there are plenty of therapists out there that do bottom-up healing work as well. I really urge you to come into relationship with your body and really know these parts and start to work with them and focus on these 3 steps that I've taught you today. And if you want to know more about my journey and the tools that I specifically teach in those 3 steps, the webinar, my proven 3 steps to self-love after a toxic relationship ends, is open, and I go through those 3 steps in more detail. You can join in the link below. I also have a free Facebook group. I go live in there quite often. I'd love to see you. And if you would like to submit an application for Heal Your Heart School, you just click the link to my calendar below, and it will take you to a place where you can register for it. Now, please click the like button on this video if it's been helpful for you to help me out, and comment below if you've got any questions or comments. I will see you in the comments after this video goes live. And here are some next step videos to help you move one step closer to having an incredibly beautiful relationship to yourself and to your future as well. And I will see you in the next video.